I was mid-sentence talking to the camera about colony temperament and nectar flow rates when I heard the unmistakable sound of boots on gravel. Not the friendly, neighborly kind, the heavy job site kind, the kind that always come with a clipboard, a smirk, and a thin excuse. By the time I turned around, 3 men in matching white hazmat suits were crossing my lawn like it was Chernobyl. One of them held a tank of industrial foam. Another was already halfway to the cedar platform where my Queen Hive sat, her royal court buzzing in the late afternoon sun, minding their own damn business. "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted, jogging toward them. Clipboard guy turned around without flinching. "HOA directive, sir. Immediate mitigation of biohazardous fauna. Orders came this morning." Biohazardous fauna. That's what they called my bees. The same bees that pollinated half the block's gardens. The same bees that got me featured in Local Roots Weekly last month as the beekeeper who saved the tomatoes. The same bees whose honey one of these idiots probably had on his toast this morning. "Unless there's a plague of honey on the loose," I said, pointing to the foam tank, "you're trespassing, and if you lay one finger on that hive, I swear." Camera still rolling, microphone still hot, and somewhere back at my desk, my upload bar was frozen at 97% on a video titled "What Bees Teach Us About Community and Why Some People Never Learn." Kinda poetic. I didn't know it yet, but that clip, me standing between my hive and 3 HOA goons dressed like a Dollar Tree version of the CDC, would get 1.2 million views in 2 days. And that was just the beginning. Let me back up a little. My name's Elijah Booker, Eli if you're not wearing a name tag or trying to find me for inappropriate landscaping. I'm 39, work from home, and no, I'm not a farmer. I'm a biologist turned content creator who happens to have a thing for pollinators and the quiet satisfaction of watching things grow that weren't supposed to. 3 years ago, I bought this house on the edge of a cookie-cutter neighborhood outside of Raleigh. It was the kind of development where every mailbox matched, every lawn was a golf course, and every conversation at the mailbox included a passive-aggressive comment about mulch. It wasn't love at first sight, but I saw potential. Not in the HOA, obviously, in the land. My place backs up to a forgotten drainage easement, just enough of a greenbelt to break the sameness. The backyard was overgrown, wild, ugly as hell to most folks, but I saw it for what it was, raw habitat, soil that hadn't been nuked with Scott's fertilizer into chemical submission, shade trees, native clover, and just enough sunlight to dream. Within the first 6 months, I'd transformed it into something no HOA handbook had a checkbox for. Wildflowers, milkweed, tall grasses, a couple of fruiting bushes that refused to die, and smack in the middle of it all, the Queen Hive. Built from reclaimed cedar, hand-fitted joints, polished copper fittings, it was part apiary, part art. A piece I'd designed myself after my first viral video on bee psychology took off. It was the centerpiece of my setup, and yeah, my pride and joy. That hive isn't just where I keep bees, it's the heart of Buzzcut, my YouTube channel where I talk bees, urban ecology, and occasionally the bureaucratic Kafka cosplay known as suburban HOA culture. It started as a hobby during lockdown. Now it's my job, my voice, and apparently the reason Richard Halvers wakes up angry every morning. You'll meet Richard soon. He's what happens when you mix childhood trauma, a hatred of dandelions, and just enough power to ruin a stranger's week. But back when I first moved in, he was just the guy with the tightest pants and the shortest hedge on the block. HOA treasurer. Quiet. Contained. Not yet the president of our perfect little neighborhood. Back then, the complaints hadn't started. Back then, people waved. Back then, I still thought the only stingers in this neighborhood belonged to my bees. It started like most HOA drama does, with a piece of paper that smelled faintly of toner and condescension. I found it folded once, neatly, officiously, tucked into my front door frame like a Jehovah's Witness tract. Cream-colored HOA letterhead, printed in 12-point Times New Roman. The kind of letter that starts with Dear Resident and ends with corrective action must be taken within 14 calendar days. I unfolded it slowly, standing barefoot on my porch with coffee in hand. My bees were already at work behind the house, their low hum drifting through the open windows like jazz. Morning sunlight lit up my wildflower beds, and the scent of honeysuckle carried on the breeze. It was going to be a good day, until it wasn't. Notice of violation: unauthorized agricultural structures. Section 8.4, prohibition of livestock or apiary facilities. This letter serves as formal notification that your property is currently in violation of community guidelines. The presence of active beehives constitutes a health and safety hazard to other residents and is therefore strictly prohibited. My eyes scanned the paragraph again, just to be sure I wasn't hallucinating before caffeine. Livestock. They were calling bees livestock. Somewhere a cow was offended. Below the text was a blurred photo clearly taken from behind a hedge, probably with a phone camera zoomed in from across the greenbelt. My hive, my yard, captioned like a mugshot. There was no HOA seal, no signature, just board of directors typed coldly at the bottom. I let out a slow breath and walked to the backyard. The queen hive stood where it always had, sturdy, clean, elegant. A pair of scout bees circled the air, the morning pollen already dusted across their backs like golden armor. Nothing aggressive, nothing unusual, just life, doing what it's supposed to do. I remember crouching beside the hive, one hand on the wood, listening. You can hear a healthy colony if you're quiet. There's a rhythm to it, like breath. It was steady, unbothered. They weren't the ones in trouble. I was. I knew my bylaws. I'd read them before I even moved in. Brought them with me to the closing like some people bring champagne. There was nothing in the documents about bees. Not once. Chickens, yes. Goats, oddly enough, yes. Apiaries, nada. But HOA rulebooks are like the Bible. People will quote whatever verse they need to justify their latest power trip. Still, I played it cool. I emailed the HOA that afternoon asking for clarification and a specific citation. No reply. Not even a "we'll get back to you." Just silence. Then the second letter came. And this time, it was personal. Second notice. Your non-compliance is being interpreted as willful disregard for community safety. Should the violation not be corrected within 7 days, the HOA reserves the right to initiate enforcement action, including fines of up to $250 per day and/or authorized third-party remediation at the property owner's expense. I'll admit the phrase third-party remediation got a reaction out of me, because I knew exactly what that meant. I'd seen them before, contractors hired by the HOA to handle compliance. The same guys who once painted over a neighbor's custom mailbox without warning because the color was inconsistent with neighborhood harmony. The same ones who once chopped down an entire hedgerow accidentally. I wasn't about to let them anywhere near my bees. I went straight to the next HOA meeting, armed with printouts of the bylaws, a copy of my apiary license from the state, and a folder of polite rage. That was the first time I spoke directly to Richard Halvers. He was already president by then, elected in a barely publicized vote that no one but 3 block captains and his tennis buddies showed up for. He sat at the head of the folding table in the community center, flanked by 2 bored-looking board members and a plate of untouched Costco cookies. He greeted me with a smile that felt like a paper cut. When I introduced myself and brought up the violation letter, he didn't even pretend to look surprised. Yes, Mr. Booker, we've received a number of concerns from neighbors about your setup. Like I was running a meth lab back there instead of a pollinator haven. I asked him which neighbors. He wouldn't say. Confidential, he said, like we were at Langley. I pointed to the bylaws, calmly explaining that no clause prohibited beekeeping and that I had all the appropriate certifications. Richard just folded his hands and leaned back. Well, we don't always need explicit language to enforce standards, he said, voice smooth as cheap vinyl. We're empowered to make reasonable decisions in the interest of community well-being. Allergies, noise, potential aggression. From bees? I said. Bees are docile. They die when they sting. That's not aggression. That's suicide. His smile twitched. Let's not be argumentative. And just like that, the floor was closed to further comment. No vote, no discussion, just a polite bulldozing. I walked out of that room feeling like I'd just been stung, not by a bee, by a man who'd been waiting for an excuse to put me in my place. The first fine hit my mailbox 4 days later. $250. No warning, no call, just a bland notice folded in triplicate and taped to the inside of my mailbox like a bootleg eviction. It was printed in bold, blocky letters. Enforcement action. Initiated. Non-compliant agricultural activity. I laughed, out loud, alone. Agricultural activity, like I had rows of corn out back and a scarecrow named Earl. But what got me wasn't the fine. It was the subtle shift in tone, the way the HOA had dropped any pretense of a misunderstanding. They weren't confused about the rules. They were confident they didn't need them. A week later, the tone shifted again. This time, it was my water. I stepped into the shower and got nothing but a wheezing gasp from the faucet, like the house had bronchitis. Walked outside to find my front spigot dripping rust. The HOA's contractor had accidentally shut off the wrong valve during unrelated irrigation work on the greenbelt, which, surprise, ran right along my property line. Of course, no one from the HOA returned my emails that week, but they did have time to update the community newsletter with a cheerful note. A reminder to all residents to avoid attracting stinging insects to their property. Bee colonies can be dangerous to children, pets, and individuals with allergies. The HOA discourages any activity that increases such risks. They didn't use my name, but they didn't have to. It was signed, like always, R. Halvers, HOA President. That was when the gossip started. Helen McKinley, mother of 3, self-appointed block mom, and Instagram micro-influencer with a bio that read "Wife, Mama, Warrior for Safety," started posting stories about dangerous insects spotted near the school bus stop. My house was nowhere near the stop, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that her followers, mostly other wine at 3 p.m. moms with large hats and larger opinions, were suddenly talking about my bees. Someone started a Nextdoor thread titled, "Should we allow beehives in residential zones?" The replies weren't kind. I learned I was reckless, selfish, and playing Russian roulette with toddlers. Someone claimed my bees chased their dog, despite the fact that the breed they named doesn't go outside unless carried. Another suggested I was probably harvesting honey illegally and selling it on the side, tax-free, which was hilarious considering I pay quarterly estimated taxes like clockwork. Then one night, around 11:30 p.m., I heard the sound of wood cracking. It was sharp, quick, final. I ran out back barefoot and found one of my smaller hives, Hive 3, knocked clean off its stand, frame shattered, honey pooling in the grass like blood. Bees scattered everywhere, confused, frantic, exposed. The queen was gone. I found her lifeless the next morning, curled beneath a piece of torn comb. She hadn't stung anyone. She never got the chance. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the steps of the deck, watching my girls try to regroup in the dark, their rhythm broken. That was the first time I felt rage. Not frustration, not annoyance. Rage. The kind that hits you deep in the chest and doesn't leave. But I still didn't fight back. Not yet. Instead, I did what I always do. I turned on the camera. I filmed the damage in silence, save for the sound of crickets and my quiet breath. I showed the broken hive, the footprints leading to the fence line, the queen's body. I didn't say a word until the last shot. Just me, sitting on the ground, looking into the lens. This is what fear looks like. This is what happens when people let paranoia and power dress up as policy. My bees didn't threaten anyone. They worked, they healed, they helped things grow. And someone came in the night and decided that was too dangerous to tolerate. That video, "They Killed My Queen," went up the next morning. It hit 400,000 views in 24 hours. By the end of the week, it had over 1 million. And that was when the real pressure started. I got an email from YouTube's trust and safety team. Someone had filed a privacy complaint against me, claiming one of my earlier videos showed private residential property and individuals without consent. The complaint was anonymous. I knew exactly who it was. At the same time, my monetization was suspended, pending review. No ad revenue, no super thanks, no channel memberships. Just like that, Buzzcut went dark. They hadn't just attacked my bees. They came for my voice. They wanted me silenced, erased, removed like I was just another weed in their perfect lawn. That's when I knew this wasn't about safety. It wasn't about noise, or allergies, or bylaws. It was about control. And I'd just been elected as this neighborhood's #1 threat. By the time the third fine showed up, this one $500 for continued defiance of community standards, I was done hoping they'd come to their senses. But I wasn't ready to go to war either. Not yet. I still believed in paperwork, in policy, in the idea that if you spoke calmly, brought evidence, and followed the right steps, people would listen. I mean, hell, I used to be a teacher. I once talked a 9th grader out of throwing a desk with nothing but tone and a packet of Skittles. So I figured I'd try the grown-up version of that. The first thing I did was send a certified letter to the HOA board requesting a formal hearing under Section 10.2 of the bylaws, the same bylaws Richard Halvers loved to quote, but clearly hadn't read, past page 3. The hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday night, 6 p.m. in the back of the community clubhouse, the same room we used for birthday parties, HOA potlucks, and apparently kangaroo courts. I wore a collared shirt, brought a binder. I even printed out a small stack of my bee certification paperwork, pollinator impact reports, and 3 glowing letters from local businesses that sold my honey. There were 4 board members at the table, Richard, of course, sitting in the middle like HOA Caesar, flanked by 2 women I barely recognized and one guy who looked like he hadn't updated his personality since Reagan left office. Richard smiled as I sat down, not kindly. "Mr. Booker, I hope we can keep this civil tonight." "I'm not the one showing up to people's yards in a hazmat suit," I said. He didn't laugh. I laid out my case. I showed my license from the State Agricultural Board. I cited legal protections for non-commercial urban beekeeping. I presented footage of my bees being calm, docile, going about their day like, well, bees. I reminded them that not a single documented sting had occurred in the neighborhood since I moved in. I even offered to move the hives farther from the property line, plant extra shrubs as a windbreak, and host an informational Q&A session if they wanted to educate concerned residents about what was actually happening in my yard. Helen McKinley was there too, sitting in the back row with her arms crossed, filming me with one hand and sipping from a Mom Life tumbler with the other. Her face never changed, just one long, judgmental blink. When I finished, Richard flipped through my binder with a theatrical slowness, like he was pretending to read ancient scrolls. "Very thorough," he said finally. "But this isn't just about paperwork, Mr. Booker. It's about perception. Many residents are uncomfortable. Your bees are disruptive." "To what?" I asked. "Their emotional feng shui?" More silence. Then he leaned forward, voice low and firm. "You may feel that you're educating the world, but this is a residential community, not a science fair, not a farm, not a media project." There it was. Not a science fair, not a farm, not a media project. Not, in other words, mine. "You're drawing attention to yourself," he added, "and attention brings disruption." I knew what he meant. Attention made me visible, and visible made me dangerous. A week later, I got a letter from the city zoning department. Someone had submitted a complaint alleging that I was operating a commercial business from a residential zone without a permit. They cited my YouTube channel. Not the honey, not the hives, the videos. Apparently, filming bees in my own backyard for an online audience constituted commercial filming activity, which could violate city ordinances depending on traffic, noise, and frequency. I called the zoning office. The woman on the phone sounded exhausted before I even finished my name. "You the bee guy?" "That's me." "Yeah, I've had 3 calls already. Look, between us, we've never enforced this ordinance for a guy filming insects, but we'll have to review the complaint." She paused. "For what it's worth," she added, "my kids love your videos." Still, I kept it civil. I hired a land use attorney. Small firm, guy named Marcus with a sharp suit and a sharper wit. He told me I had a solid case if things escalated, but lawsuits were slow, expensive, and exhausting. "They're trying to drown you in process," he said, flipping through the violation letters, "make you tap out from fatigue, death by papercut." I nodded. "They don't want to win a legal battle. They want me to give up." "Exactly. They want you out. Quietly. Voluntarily." We sent a cease and desist to the HOA citing overreach, harassment, and potential liability for property damage to Hive 3. The board never acknowledged receipt. But the fines stopped, temporarily. Then came the HOA newsletter's April edition with an article titled, "Knowing When to Say Goodbye, a Message About Harmony." No byline, just a not-so-subtle screed about how certain residents were creating disruption through personal agendas, and how sometimes, for the good of the whole, it's best to let go of what no longer fits the community vision. They didn't mention my name. They didn't have to. I was the only person in that neighborhood with a personal agenda that buzzed. So yeah, I tried playing nice. I tried the meetings, the letters, the mediation, the legal route. I gave them every opportunity to act like adults. And in return, they killed one of my hives, vandalized my property, attacked my income, and tried to erase my voice. All in the name of harmony. Which is funny, because if they'd ever bothered to learn anything about bees, they'd know. A hive doesn't thrive through silence. It thrives through balance. And if you push it too far, it doesn't collapse, it swarms. The twist didn't come like thunder. It came like rot, quiet, slow, already there by the time I noticed the smell. It started with an email, not a hostile one, not another HOA notice, just a short message from someone named Denise Camden, subject line, "You probably don't remember me, but..." I almost deleted it, but something about the wording kept me from clicking trash. I opened it and read, "Eli, I used to serve on the HOA board before Richard Halvers took over. I resigned 2 years ago. I've been watching what's happening to you, and honestly, I'm disgusted. I probably should have said something sooner. You didn't hear this from me, but I found something you might want to see. Attached is a board email chain from 2022. Thought you deserved to know what you're up against." There were 4 attachments. I clicked the first one, and my stomach dropped. It was a string of internal emails sent before I ever received the first violation notice. The subject line? Buzzcut Guy, Potential Liability? The earliest message was from Halvers himself, sent to the full board. "We need to move quickly on this. His presence and the public attention makes people nervous. Also, we've had preliminary interest from a developer looking at properties on our side of the greenbelt. His lot blocks potential access from the east. Can't move forward unless he's gone." I sat there blinking at the screen. "Developer? I hadn't heard a single word about that, but the next email made things worse. It was from Chad Claremont, doctor, allergy himself, replying to the board, "If we can get him written up and fined enough, most people just pack it in and leave. He's not one of us. He doesn't belong in this neighborhood. You want my vote on this expedited compliance thing? You've got it. Also, side note, Helen's still good for the amenity fund if this moves fast. She says $25,000 to you personally if it's done by summer." $25,000. That was the price on my head. I scrolled, horrified. Another board member chimed in nervously. "This seems risky. He's got an audience. If this goes public, it'll blow back." And Richard's reply? "He won't. That kind never stays long. A few fines, a little pressure, and they go quietly." That never. That kind. He didn't say YouTubers. He didn't say pesticide users or urban beekeepers. He meant me. The way I look, the way I talk, the fact that my skin doesn't match the rest of their Saturday brunch crowd. That was the kind he meant. It wasn't just about bees. It never was. They saw me building something visible, something rooted, something black and bold and present, and it terrified them, because I wasn't hiding, and I wasn't leaving. But there was one more attachment, a PDF titled Phase 2 Ridgeview Redevelopment Packet. It was a site map, and there it was, my lot, marked in red, labeled obstruction. The proposed development, a luxury walking path and access road connecting the east cul-de-sac to a future commercial lot just beyond the greenbelt. In other words, they wanted to pave a damn nature trail straight through my garden. The bees? A nuisance. My videos? An embarrassment. Me? An obstacle. The whole thing was a long con. Richard wasn't just weaponizing the HOA for fun, he was clearing the board for a payday, a contract with a developer who'd already scouted the land. That's why he needed me gone. Not fined, not silenced, removed. I sat with that for a long time. It didn't feel like rage this time, it felt cold, focused. They thought I was just another guy with a hobby. They thought they could pressure me, wear me down, squeeze me out of my own space. They thought I'd disappear. But they forgot one thing. I don't just build hives. I build networks. I build community. I document everything. And now, I had proof. Emails, financial intent, racial motive, a paper trail of corruption wrapped in suburban shrubbery and lawn-clipping smiles. They thought they knew who they were dealing with. But they'd been watching my bees. They never watched me. They wanted a quiet exit. They were about to get the loudest possible stay. I spent the next 48 hours building something far more dangerous than a hive, a strategy. Step 1. Secure the evidence. I backed up every email, screenshot, PDF, and video to 3 separate encrypted drives. One on the cloud, one on a thumb drive I taped under my kitchen sink, one mailed to my lawyer Marcus with a sticky note. "If I disappear, release everything. I'm only half joking." Marcus called after scanning the files. "Okay," he said. "This went from annoying to explosive real fast. You've got breach of fiduciary duty, discrimination, conspiracy to defraud the HOA, misuse of funds. This is full nuclear." I nodded, already opening a fresh Google Doc titled HOA Exposed, Master Thread. Step 2, hit record. I'd spent the last year making videos about bee behavior, hive design, sustainable gardening, but now I had something new, a story. One people could rally behind, not just beekeeper versus HOA. This was a guy being run off his land by a board of smug suburban schemers who wanted to bulldoze his bees for a walking path and a payout. With race, money, and privilege humming underneath like a low-level current nobody wanted to talk about. So I made a new video. I called it The Hive War, How My Neighbors Tried to Erase Me. The thumbnail, me holding a broken honeycomb frame in one hand and the HOA fine notice in the other. I blurred Halver's name, for now. In the video, I laid out the story, piece by piece, calm, factual, camera steady. I didn't cry, I didn't shout, I didn't beg for sympathy. I presented documents, I showed maps. I walked viewers through how the board planned to remove me, not because I broke rules, but because I was inconvenient to a developer and, yeah, probably didn't fit their preferred skin tone for community face. Then I ended with a question. If this can happen to me, on my own property, with a camera running and a license in hand, what happens to people who don't have that protection? What happens when your neighborhood stops being a place you live and becomes a machine for turning people like you into problems that need to be handled? I scheduled the video for 8 a.m. the next morning. Then I got to work on step 3. Step 3? Go public. Loudly. I reached out to every local reporter, blogger, eco-activist, zoning watchdog, and HOA horror TikToker I could find. I sent them a copy of the redevelopment plan with my property marked obstruction. I attached the emails. I sent before and after photos of Hive 3. I linked the full video with press permissions. The story practically wrote itself. HOA targets. Black beekeeper to clear land for hidden real estate deal. By noon that day, my inbox was a battlefield. One small publication, Triangle Dispatch, bit first. Then a bigger blog reposted it. Then a popular TikTok creator named @Suburban Spill stitched my video with the caption, "I'm sorry, they knocked over a beehive to build a luxury walking trail." It exploded. Step 4, bring in the experts. I looped in a contact from the North Carolina Pollinator Network, someone I'd met at a bee convention last year. She wasn't just supportive, she was furious. Do they know that urban pollinators are a protected ecological asset in this state? Apparently, they didn't. She sent me a letter on official letterhead stating that my apiary was an ecological benefit site under state guidance, and that removal without due cause could constitute an environmental violation. Oh, and she looped in 2 professors from UNC Chapel Hill's entomology department. Guess who volunteered to walk the site with news cameras? Step 5, flip the neighborhood. Because here's the thing about HOA boards. They love to say they represent the community. But that only works if the community agrees with them. So I knocked on doors. Calmly. Personally. I talked to folks who'd known me for 2 years whose tomatoes grew bigger thanks to my bees. I told them about the redevelopment plan. I showed them the emails. I asked gently whether a walking path and a few property value points were worth the cost. Some looked ashamed, others angry, and some, quietly, like they were saying something forbidden, told me, "We were never okay with how they treated you. We just didn't know how to speak up." So I gave them away. I started a petition. Remove halvers, restore the hive. Simple, clear, targeted. Within 24 hours, it had 78 signatures, out of 94 homes. And step 6? Well, that was the most satisfying one of all. I invited the media, not just to cover the story, but to attend the next HOA meeting. Because if Halvers wanted a spectacle, I was going to give him a stage. He was about to learn what happens when you try to smoke out the wrong hive. The meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. sharp on a Thursday. It was supposed to be the usual HOA affair. Bad coffee, folding chairs, 15 minutes of dead air before someone argued about mulch. But this time, something was different. By 6:30, the parking lot was full. People were standing shoulder to shoulder in the tiny rec room of the clubhouse. The air smelled like lawn clippings and tension. Folding chairs scraped against the tile like nervous whispers. Richard Halvers walked in at 6:48, right on cue, flanked by 2 board members like suburban Secret Service. He wore a navy blazer over a white polo and khakis that looked like they'd never bent at the knee. His smile was tight, forced, rehearsed. He didn't know yet, but he would. I sat in the front row with my laptop open, microphone clipped to my collar. Marcus, my lawyer, sat beside me, calm, unreadable, dressed like he was about to sue someone into a different zip code. Cameras lined the back wall, one from Triangle Dispatch, one from a local NBC affiliate, and one TikToker with a ring light clipped to her hoodie and 600,000 followers who came for a live reckoning. HOA meetings are public, after all. And this one? It was about to go viral. Richard cleared his throat and called the meeting to order. His voice cracked just slightly as he said, "Let's begin with open concerns before we proceed to board matters." I raised my hand before he even finished the sentence. "Mr. Booker," he said, trying to sound neutral. I stood, clicked the remote for the projector. The screen behind him lit up. Slide 1, Operation Obstruction, how this HOA tried to erase me. He flinched. "I'd like to present a timeline of actions taken against me," I said calmly, "as well as internal communications obtained through a whistleblower that suggests deliberate misconduct by this board, including financial conspiracy and racial targeting." That was slide 2. They'll leave quietly, a breakdown of racism in HOA leadership. The room went dead silent, except for one gasp from the back. I didn't look at Richard, I didn't have to. His face was pale and tight, like someone had swapped his coffee for battery acid. I walked them through everything. The emails, the $25,000 bribe offer, the redevelopment map with my property marked in red, the destruction of Hive 3, the coordinated complaints, the violation of fiduciary duties, the lies. "You were elected to protect this community," I said, voice steady, "not profit from it, not weaponize rules against people you don't like, not silence the people who grow things you can't control." I clicked to the final slide, a freeze frame of Richard's email highlighted in yellow. That kind never stays long. The words hung there like smoke. Then I stepped aside. Marcus stood up next. He delivered a blistering legal summary. Terms like civil liability, racial discrimination, imminent litigation, and class action potential rang out in the fluorescent air like thunderclaps. He handed printed folders to each board member. "Consider yourselves officially notified," he said, "that any further attempt to interfere with my client's property will be regarded as coordinated harassment. This includes sabotage, intimidation, and defamatory speech, all of which have been documented." Richard tried to interrupt, stammered something about misinterpreted language, but he never got the chance to finish, because Helen McKinley stood up in the second row and said loudly, "Is that what you told the developer too, Richard? That you'd take care of it?" Heads turned, whispers snapped like dry branches. "I didn't say that," he mumbled. "Yes, you did," she snapped. "You came to me for the $25,000. Don't pretend I brought it to you." The room imploded. People shouted. Neighbors turned on neighbors. Someone yelled, "You sold us out." Another voice added, "Is this why our dues went up?" And someone in the back said what everyone else was thinking. "You went after him because he's black and didn't kiss your ass." Halvers tried to call for order, but no one was listening. The president of the HOA was unraveling in front of a live stream watched by 10,000 people. By the end of the night, 3 board members had resigned. A motion to recall Richard Halvers passed by a margin so wide it didn't need counting. The community voted to dissolve the current board and appoint a temporary oversight committee, including me. I declined, but I made them promise one thing: a formal audit of every action taken under Halvers' presidency, and a full restoration of my rights as a property owner and beekeeper. They agreed. The next morning, I posted a follow-up video, title "The Swarm Wins." It opened with footage of Hive 3 rebuilt, bees swarming around fresh comb, then cut to the line from Richard's email. "He won't stay long." I looked into the camera and said, "Still here." The comments flooded in, "This is better than Netflix." HOA got smoked by a beekeeper? I love it. Justice is sweet, like, you know. The video hit 3.8 million views by Sunday. By Monday morning, my inbox looked like it had survived a small war. There were interview requests from 3 local news stations, 1 national morning show, a sustainable agriculture podcast, and somehow a British documentary producer who wanted to feature me in a miniseries called The Suburban Resistance. But the one that hit hardest? An email from a high school biology teacher in Michigan. "We watched your video in class. The kids were furious. We talked about ecosystems, justice, and the power of documenting the truth. One student said, 'He protected the hive like the hive protected him.'" Yeah, that one got me. The fallout came fast. By midweek, the City Ethics Committee opened an investigation into the Ridgeview HOA. Richard Halvers was formally named in 2 complaints, one for racial discrimination, one for collusion with developers while serving on a community board. That luxury walking path? Scrapped. The developer pulled out once the media caught wind of the scheme. A follow-up segment aired on WRAL News, complete with dramatic piano music, a close-up of my hive, and the phrase "racially motivated land targeting." They even used a split screen, me calmly explaining pollination, and Richard being chased by a reporter across a golf course yelling, "Mr. Halvers, do you have a moment to talk about your emails?" He did not, but the most unexpected public moment came at the Triangle Community Forum, hosted at a downtown civic center. The city had invited residents to speak about issues of zoning, HOAs, and suburban policy. I hadn't planned on going, but Marcus insisted. "You're not just a case anymore," he said. "You're a voice." So I showed up, wore a plain green t-shirt that said Buzzcut in clean white font, brought no notes, just a frame of honeycomb from Hive 3 and my quiet anger. When it was my turn, I walked to the podium, held up the honeycomb, and said, "This is what collaboration looks like, thousands of beings working toward a single purpose, and when they're threatened, they don't scatter, they swarm." Then I laid it out, how power can twist neighborhood policy into a weapon, how a black man with bees became a problem in a zip code that smiled through gritted teeth, how silence nearly let them win. The crowd stood when I finished, not clapped, stood. After that, Buzzcut blew up. I crossed 500,000 subscribers by the end of the month. Brands came knocking, eco-gardening companies, sustainable wood suppliers, even a tea brand that wanted to do a honey collab. I turned most of them down. This was never about monetization. It was about occupation, my right to occupy space without apology or permission, and to document what happens when someone tries to take it away. But I said yes to one partnership, NC Pollinator Network. Together we launched a program called Hive Back, providing microgrants for urban beekeepers and gardeners fighting HOA harassment. We got applications from Georgia, Ohio, California. Some of the stories were worse than mine. They didn't have an audience, now they do. As for the Ridgeview neighborhood, well, let's just say the Buzzcut incident is now part of local lore. Richard Halvers moved out quietly, listed his house with a different agency, and left town within 6 weeks. His lawn went wild before he sold it. Dandelions everywhere. Fitting. The new HOA board, yes, a completely new one, passed what they now call the Booker Amendment. It explicitly protects eco-focused property use, including apiaries, native gardens, and non-disruptive environmental filming. I didn't write it, but I did smile when they passed it. The neighborhood changed after that. Not in a fairy tale way, just lighter. People talked more, asked questions, offered to help. A few neighbors who'd never made eye contact now waved from across the street. One guy dropped off a jar of fig preserves with a note that said simply, "Thanks for fighting." I didn't ask for this fight, but I wasn't afraid of it either. They thought they could erase me. Turns out, when you try to tear down a hive, you just make it louder. It's quiet now. The kind of quiet I earned. The kind of quiet that hums low and steady with the rhythm of wings moving in harmony. Hive 3 is rebuilt. Not exactly the same, it never could be, but stronger. I added reinforced cedar, a new copper roof, and engraved a single word into the front slat: resilience. I didn't do it for style, I did it to remind myself what's possible when you don't flinch. The yard is wild again, in the best way. Goldenrod, echinacea, milkweed, and those rogue black-eyed Susans I keep meaning to prune, but never quite do. The air smells like sun-warmed herbs and fresh honey. Every so often, a bee lands on the rim of my coffee mug like she owns the place. She kind of does. The HOA hasn't sent a letter in months. The new board chair, nice guy named Tom, stops by sometimes to drop off clippings for compost. Last week he handed me a laminated plaque and said, "The board voted unanimously. We want to make it official." I didn't ask for a plaque, but it was nice to hold it, read the words, "In recognition of Elijah Booker for defending the right to grow, to thrive, and to remain." It's bolted to a small post near the edge of the yard, just beyond the reach of the mowers, where the wildflowers get a little too tall, and where nobody bothers them anymore. Buzzcut still runs strong. I don't post every day. Sometimes I go a week without filming anything. But when I do post, it's not just about bees now. It's about occupying space with intention. It's about what it means to tend something, protect something, build something that buzzes even when people want silence. I get letters, people from all over, telling me they finally planted their first garden, or started their first hive, or stood up at a board meeting for the first time. I tell them the same thing every time. The hive doesn't need to be big, it just needs to be yours, and you have to protect it. As for me, I sit outside most mornings. Same porch, same mug, same bees doing the same work they've always done. Not bothering anyone, not going anywhere, just existing. Loudly, freely, beautifully. Exactly the way I was told I couldn't.